All right, so let's start off with our One Detroit contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal. Hey guys, it's really good to see you.
Good to be here.
You too.
Yeah, there has been so much going on in the world since the last time the three of us all got together.
Well, there's so many different issues, and I think in a lot of places we're in denial. I mean, we've got a school budget that started July 1st that is over $2 billion in deficit. Schools have no clue what their funding is going to be for the school year, where they're going to have to cut. State budgets in deficit, and meanwhile you have a governor and a legislature who aren't working together on much of anything. I think in terms of the virus, you look at the numbers over the last few weeks, last month or so, the curve is clearly flattened.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that virus-wise, we're in better position than some other states right now. I think the fear that I have, and I think the fear that a lot of public health officials have, is that this could become sort of a situation like rolling blackouts, right? You have one area of the country where you've got a really bad problem at a time when other states are experiencing less, and then it kind of moves around. One thing to think about is the states that are in the worst shape right now, Florida and Texas and Arizona. How many students from those states attend colleges here in the state of Michigan, especially the University of Michigan, which has a huge out-of-state population? As you sort of plan for the immediate future, I think you got to think about whether all of the work that we did to get control of this could be for naught if, as is normal in this country, people move around. People go from state to state pretty easily.
Let me ask you both this. What are you watching now in the next week? I know we had talked a little bit about how people are feeling about the monuments around the country right now. Nolan, what else are you watching?
What we have is two different movements going on. You have the folks out there who are demonstrating for a specific outcome and waiting to hear what they expect to hear, waiting to see actions they expect to take. But you also have a lot of people who are out there killing folks. I mean, we saw the 8-year-old killed in Atlanta. You're seeing still a lot of violence, connected to these demonstrations. And I think that's getting to the point where cities can't tolerate that sort of lawlessness anymore. On the statues, I think that's a sort of an offshoot of the violent element of this. Removing statues from the public square, is something communities ought to debate and do out of the rightness of their hearts. But it's been so indiscriminate.
Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, I think to associate the violence with the movement is probably a little irresponsible. The movement is not about violence. There are always violent elements who latch on to big movements and have their own agendas. And I think you got to be able to keep that clear. That doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be focused on that violence and focused on especially the lethal violence that's taking place. But let's remember that all of this was caused by official lethal violence, which is sanctioned in state after state in this country. And that Black people have had enough of that. Also, the monuments. We've been saying for more than a century that these monuments are not okay. We've been trying to have civil debate in the public square about what should be memorialized and what's not. And white officials, especially in the South, but also in the North, have basically been told us to kick rocks. So we're in the streets saying we're going to do it ourselves. This is the result of an America that has been reluctant and too damn slow to fix systemic racism and inequality. And we're going to have to some of this is going to have to take its course.
I don't care what the cause is. And the mayors and police chiefs in these cities who have been afraid or timid about addressing the violence because they don't want to be seen as being in opposition to the rightful protests. I think they've got to get a hold of themselves and their cities. You can't have people dying. I don't care how just the cause is. You can't have the deaths of people being seen as worthwhile collateral damage.
I mean, the idea, the equation of those two things is insulting to the people who have said this is enough. It doesn't mean that we don't care about the things that are also happening. Those things are also manifestations of inequality. They are manifestations of the violence that Black America has learned from white America in this country. The idea that somehow this is about Black people not being able to comport themselves is absurd.
Nobody said that, but I watched the interview with that father of that 8-year-old child who was killed, and I tell you, that was as moving as anything else I've seen. And I think his loss is as legitimate and as great as anything we've seen. And I think asking him to sacrifice his child in the name of any cause is irresponsible.
But nobody's asking him to sacrifice his child. No one is sanctioning that happen. What we're trying to do is dismantle the system that creates the violence that kills not only his child, but all these other people. It is all part of the same American experience. It is all driven by the same continuum of violence that African American people suffer in America.
These aren't white children getting killed. These aren't white neighborhoods being
Of course not.
Taken over and terrorized. When the structure breaks down, when you don't have a reliable system of law and order, it's always the poor and the Blacks, the Browns who suffer the most.
We suffer the most under the.
I don't know how that's justifiable by any measure.
Law and order is what killed George Floyd. Law and order is what killed Breonna Taylor. That's the point.
And the absence of it is what are killing these children all over.
And so we've got to have a different way of thinking about how we deal with community safety. We've got to have a different way of thinking. We have a different way of thinking about how we de-escalate the violence that exists in the Black community. That is all driven by official policy. This is not a lack of law and order. It is the law and order system that we have in place that encourages all of the violence that we see in these communities.
I don't disagree with that.
Hang on. This gets me to thinking and wondering, then how can we have these conversations or some kind of systemic policy change if there is disagreement on even the optics or understanding of what is happening right now? Just listening to the two of you disagree perception-wise of what you see and experience.
Well, I mean, if you look, I mean, there are policy things you can do right now. I mean, you look at the recommendations on from the Joint Task Force on Prison and Jail Incarceration in terms of de-escalating situations, treating the mental or handling the mentally ill with mental health professionals rather than police officers, arresting fewer people for minor infractions. Those are all things put together by a bipartisan task force.
So that task force has produced some proposals that have already been put into place. We're already reforming bail at some level and some other things. There's no question that the state level is where I think you will get the action that touches people's lives most closely. But this federal legislation would stop some things nationwide, which means that Black people who live in states where there is no appetite for that kind of reform would also get some relief.